Welcome to Marvel Vision, a podcast about Marvel, the MCU, and right now, Moon Knight. I'm Alex.
I'm Justin.
And we are going to be talking about the Moon Knight finale. Series finale? Season finale? I guess we're going to find out.
The world is wide open, but I'll tell you what, some stuff happens here, you know?
Yeah. There are scenes. They happen in a particular order. And by the end, there are credits. And there you go.
That's right. And then I'll tell you what, this is a big reveal. There's a scene hidden within the credits.
Has Marvel ever done that before?
Like a scarab left on a dead body for no reason. There's a scene hidden in the credits.
It was left there for a reason. Not a good one, but we can get into it. We're going to be talking about episode 6, Gods and Monsters. So if you haven't watched it on Disney Plus yet, please go do that because we're going to get into spoilers. But the broad overview, it all ends here as Harrow resurrects Amit, and Marc and Steven manage to work their way back to life and to power as Moon Knight. Khonshu is resurrected thanks to Layla, who gets superpowers of her own as she bonds with Taweret, to become her avatar on Earth. Briefly, but maybe not briefly. I guess we'll see what happens.
I think, based on the scene where out of nowhere where the girl's like, "Hey, are you an Egyptian superhero?"
She's like, "I am."
Yeah.
Hello.
I was like, I think she's going to be back.
Yeah, I think so too. But by the end, they do manage to beat Harrow. They do manage to beat Amit. And then we get a little tease of even more finality at the end here with the reveal, as you called it, in the post-credit sequence of Jake Lockley, who shows up and kills Harrow and Amit and is still teaming up with Khonshu, even though Marc and Steven have freed themselves. Now, before we touch on any of these specific plot points, as we usually do with these finales, let's talk about the show as a whole. Unfortunately, we don't have Pete, our counterpoint of everything Marvel is awesome all the time, constantly, forever here to counterbalance us. But what did you think of it?
Interesting sort of telling remark. I mean, we talked about this last time, how, because I think we all agreed that we loved the beginning of this. Or I'll just speak for myself. I thought this had such a great start. I liked the shifting perspectives. We were really riding along with Moon Knight from the beginning, and were able to go through the same things he was going through. And as the series went on, we got away from that and got into this sort of classic big Marvel storytelling where so much is happening. And we get that a little bit here, and I like big storytelling, and I like a lot of the moves here. It's just when things get so big so quickly, there's so many gaps, and we can talk about them as it goes through, and these gaps just harm the process of really following this story.
Yeah, my big takeaway here, like you said, there's a lot of stuff that was good. The big good thing about it was Oscar Isaac, who gave a great performance throughout the entire series. Very fun. They clearly gave him a lot of room to play against himself. We got to see the actress May Calamaway, I believe is her name, playing Layla, do a similar two personalities thing, which was super fun, and I liked her as well. So overall, the cast was really good. Like I've said a couple of times on the podcast, I think the direction was really good as well. There were always some interesting creative camera moves in every episode. Maybe a little less so here, where they probably needed to previs a lot of those huge fights and things. But
yeah,
at the same time, you had cool shots like Harrow and Moon Knight running at each other on the pyramids with the moon in the background. Fun stuff throughout. My big thing here, and not to compare it to other shows, but in my mind, the most comparable in a weird way is WandaVision, the first Disney Plus show. And I think, at least you and I agree about this, maybe I'm wrong, but the thing that really worked about WandaVision was the puzzle box, and when it devolved into a superhero slugfest with people shooting rays and magic at each other at the end, it wasn't quite as strong. Like, it lost a little bit, no pun intended, magic. Moon Knight, to me, almost was the other way. The puzzle blocks elements were distracting and didn't work, in my mind, because they dispensed with them pretty quickly. Like, there was no question about the reality of the show. And like I've talked about over the past couple of episodes, they kept trying to jam that back in there. Like, what is real? What is happening? Who are these personalities? Are they in a psychiatric hospital? Are they not? And it was nonsense versus the fights were fun and everybody was punching each other and that was enjoyable. If they had just leaned into that and not tried to work in the Jeff Lemire, not really Brian Michael Bendis, but like the questions about sanity era of Moon Knight, get rid of that in the first episode and then just go from there. That's fine. You can make it like Tomb Raider, The Mummy, Indiana Jones, like we talked about with superheroes, and that's all good because that stuff in my mind worked.
Yeah, I mean, it's very telling in the after the battle when Mark wakes up in the sanitarium again, and he's just like, you know what? I don't believe this, and he falls backward, and it's over. I was like, oh, cool, man.
Yeah,
Me neither,
thanks.
I guess.
Thanks
I'm
for
with
showing
you.
us that scene.
Yeah, and I also think this show, like for being called Moon Knight, we sort of didn't really get to ride with Moon Knight very often. Moon Knight was sort of this thing that was like put a little bit on a shelf or at a distance, where it was like, what does he do? What are his powers? What does it mean when he switches into the Steven suit Moon Knight? Suddenly, that Moon Knight is a badass in this and learned to fight. I guess when he was Sand or something, like
Sure,
it's
no.
just
He fought
unexplained.
on the boat. He fought on the boat, and he was like, "If Steven can do this, I can do this as well."
Yeah.
And then he could.
Yeah, it's just like it lost a bit of the fun of it, and we never got
Mhm.
to really be like, I understand this hero Moon Knight because there's just so much going on. He's alive, then he dies, but he comes back to life because Khonshu powers him. Khonshu is a jerk. He leaves Mark behind. Taweret has an avatar. It's just like things happening all the time, so we don't get to really take a second and enjoy them.
Speaking of which, and this ties into a lot of the discussion we had with the last episode, and I know it sounds like we're being very negative here. I think overall, I had a fine time watching this show. I
Yep.
don't think it's a disaster by any means, but I think there is a lot to pick apart here that could have worked better. This includes, I completely did not pick up on this in the last episode, but watching the previously on, they showed the scene of Harrow talking to Khonshu after he had been stuck in the statue and referring to him as being abused by him. That was clearly something they were
Yeah.
trying to parallel between Harrow's relationship with Khonshu and Mark's relationship with his mother. Not that they need to state it out loud, but I feel like there could have been more of a line drawn there between these two characters because that was not obvious to me, particularly in the episode where Harrow was mostly off screen when we were actually talking about this.
Well, and like we didn't like. Do we ever find out fully what Harrow and Khonshu's relationship was? Like what happened? Was he? I'm guessing he was a former Avatar, like Mark Spector
Yeah.
is now. But we don't ever really know what that. Like I would have loved a quick little scene of him as Moon Knight. What was
Mm-hmm.
what does his Moon Knight armor look like, and all that. Like that then brings it all together in a way, as opposed to it being like just a series of assumptions we're supposed to make.
It feels like there is a bolder version of this show that could have happened. And I don't know if it was trimmed down at some point or they just never really got there in the writing room. But to your point, yes, we established pretty early on that Harrow was a former avatar of Khonshu. But in the same way where I was sort of armchair writing the last episode and wondering why didn't we delve more into his Jewish origin if you're going to throw it in there. Mind you, that didn't play at all in this episode, which I'm
Yeah.
fine with. And that's good, but like still wish we had never brought it up. Like there's an episode where you could have like hit that really hard and we didn't get that. Similarly, there's potentially an episode where you do dual flashbacks where it's not just seeing Mark Stevens' backstory, but also Harrow's backstory, showing those parallels there, showing how they were
Yeah.
abused in very different ways and why these are very similar men to the point where we get this big final fight and they do state out loud at the end here with Amit and Khonshu. They're like, we're not that different. We want like 10% different stuff. Why can't we
Yeah.
agree on this? So versus Harrow and Mark, who are just having fist fight in the street without any of that philosophy, we get it through Amit and Khonshu, and that's a bit of a missed opportunity.
Well, plus, like that, doing what you just said would have definitely set up why Mark's like, nah, I'm not going to kill this guy. I identify with him because the way it happened now is like, man, you killed everybody else. You killed everybody nonstop all the time. Like, why you're not going to kill the big bad guy? Like, I don't buy that transition just because Layla
Right.
was like, hey, maybe don't do that because it's the end of the fight. I was like, okay, I'll take it. But
Yeah, I mean, they played it down to the music and the way they shot it as this is his moment of becoming a superhero. He has
yeah,
decided not to kill. But as we've talked about incessantly on this podcast and other podcasts, the whole should superheroes kill thing, frankly, is tired at this point. I don't need to see it on TV shows. Like you just said, it didn't enter into Moon Knight at all. Like, it was never a question. It was never like, ooh, he's too extreme a vigilante. He really needs to pull back. It was just he was the fist of Khonshu, and he decided this time not to be the blade of Khonshu or whatever, you know? So
yeah.
uh, I don't know. It's also, frankly, structurally, and I understand why they did this way, but it feels like a little bit of a cheat to not show us Jake in that final sequence and only show it in the end credits. Because another thing that could have showed us Steven pulling back. If Jake emerges, murders everybody, both Marc and Steven realize, oh shit, there is this third personality that we knew was there and ignored and didn't talk about for some reason, but whatever. And they see
Yeah.
that is the extreme. That is actually what Khonshu wants. Again, that would have been impetus for them to pull back there. But it
And
didn't
just
happen.
and also a funny moment rather than just like this open-ended mystery that we use as a as teaser for a future series or something. A moment where they're like, "Wait, who's this dude?" Or some
Mm-hmm.
kind of like little moment where it's like, "We're sorted out now. We got another dude. How many other guys are in here?" Or something like that.
Well, and also, as we talked about the last episode, while we're picking everything apart, firmly establishing Jake as a third personality who works with Khonshu really confuses that whole heart thing that is going on in the afterlife.
Yeah.
Because there's two hearts, but there's a third personality there, and maybe more as they tease. So, like, I just don't understand how that works. You know, like, I
Yeah.
understand what they were going for there. They were simplifying it, but unfortunately, like you've been getting at, they complicate it too much for it to actually make sense when you look at it closely.
Yeah. Well, let's walk through the episode a little bit
Yeah.
because there are some specific things that I think are fun to talk about. You get early on, you get the line from Harrow, like Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, whoever else might be in there, wink. And I think he said wink, right?
He did.
He
He said
said
it
the
out
word
loud. I
wink.
was watching it with the closed captions on, and it said wink in the closed
Yeah,
captions. So,
there it
yes.
is.
Mm-hmm.
Really teasing that up. And when Harrow pulls the Amit statue, and maybe just because this came out on May the 4th, I was like, is that Jar Jar Binks? Is that statue Jar Jar Binks? Because I was like, that looks a lot like Jar Jar. And to have when Amit's revealed, I was like, what if he's like, Misa gonna get these souls back or something? Would have been
Well,
a
did you
strong
feel like,
choice.
uh, again, maybe I'm looking too closely at this, but that's kind of our job here on the podcast that we don't get paid for.
We have Marvel vision.
Yes, we have Marvel Vision. It felt like there were bits missing or something of a lot of these sequences while they were going through it. Like, there were things like uh, this is sort of a side thing, but Layla, the entire episode, wasn't she in the room with Stephen Mark when he got shot? The fact that they were like, ugh, I don't know where she is. Well, she's just knocking out our guys. I guess we got to leave this scarab and go. Ooh, there's somebody in this temple. Well, let's leave again. It
Well,
was just strange.
it was strange, the sort of the blocking of this whole sequence
Mm-hmm.
because she was in the room and he was shot, and the way guns work is you sort of have to be in the same place. So
Mm-hmm.
he was shot in the same room where Layla was also there, and moments later she's gone, and they're like pushing the body over in the water there. So
Well, and I bring that up in reference to the whole Amit resurrection thing because it was the same sort of thing. I'm forgetting these specific moments, but there's a couple of things where, like, when he takes the statue and his staff turns into the crocodile head,
the gator cane.
very cool. How did that happen? It felt like there was a shot missing in the middle there. Like, it just sort of turned into it and there was no
Yeah.
explanation or anything like that. And then again, while I'm sort of jumping all over the place a little bit and just talking about things that I felt like very quick and weird, the whole thing where they're like, we need to have a big ceremony to lock these people in these statues. And then ultimately Harrow frees Abbott by stepping on the statue.
Well, it's like, have you ever made a statue? They're hard to build, easy to
Mm-hmm.
wreck. Just like
Yeah.
a sandcastle, which is something we deal with a lot here, when the enemy, and a lot of this is just the beach itself.
Oh wow, man.
You thought
You
about
can.
that?
I never thought about that. I've never really thought about how you can punch the beach and never really change it. Is that anything we've talked about on this podcast before?
I don't think so. It doesn't sound like us. Well, you're not a beach guy.
No.
You don't like
How
the
can you
beach.
tell? How can you tell?
I feel like we have talked about
Is
that
it my
because you don't.
pasty skin?
Well, you don't like the sun, obviously, but you also
Sure.
don't like sand, tiny sand.
No. Ugh. No
Yeah.
thanks. It gets everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a
So
cost
you.
benefit thing, honestly. Like going to
Oh,
the beach.
interesting.
Going to the beach could be nice. Hanging out with friends, going to the water, good time. But then you're so disgusting afterwards. Sand is everywhere. It's such a chore. No
I
thanks.
love that old Beach Boys song where like it's a cost benefit thing being at the beach.
I'll
I
tell you
wish
what.
they all could be
I've
cost
recently
benefit.
seen on two different shows set in the UK. They went to beaches and they're like, "Oh, what a nice time we're having at the beach." It was all stones. Like there was no
Yeah,
stand there. It
Pebble
was just
Beach.
Pebble Beach. Yeah, and I was like, "Oh, that feels very uncomfortable to me, but maybe less chance of
Interesting.
being having a bad time."
So you're saying so you don't like sand because it's just too small.
It's too
You want
small.
big sand.
Tiny rocks. No thanks. Scary. Where do they
Um,
come from?
exactly how they get so small. And if they're that small, are there even smaller rocks we don't even see?
Oh
What about the
man,
sand we don't see?
microscopic rocks getting in my eyes.
Yeah, we might be at the beach right now. We just don't feel it. Because I do think maybe you didn't like this episode so much because of all of the sand.
Yeah. Like my best friend Anakin Skywalker, may the fourth be with you. I don't like sand.
Your best friend. The gator cane, do you feel, and then maybe it is a crocodile. I just like the way gator cane sounds.
Yeah, they do say later
Better.
gators, so it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Do you feel like someday we're all going to enter like a gator cane phase of our lives where we are like, look at this cool cane I have?
Probably. Do you drink Gatorade because they have those points, and if you drink enough Gatorade, you can get a Gator cane.
Gator cane? Wow, that's a lot. You got to save up for a lifetime to get a gator
Totally.
cane.
Absolutely. But the nice thing about it is, if you drink a lot of Gatorade, you age real quick.
Yeah, it's so salty.
Yes.
So salty. The gator cane does a lot of soul snatching. And again, Layla is hiding out with the bad guys, and they're like, "Anybody want to question the one person wearing a mask? Hey, who's mask lady?"
Yeah.
But they don't. And then, fortunately, Tabaret shows up and talks through. I want to say Borat.
I think it was Borat. I like that sequence. It was surprising. I was going to say strange, but
Yeah.
surprising because we didn't know Towerette could do that or have any indication before. But fun.
It was cool.
It was fun.
I like that idea. And honestly, the Tabaret stuff through all of this was some of the more fun stuff. The energy that the character, the voice playing Tabaret brought to it, I thought was a nice addition. And when Layla turns into, I guess, Hippo Bird Knight, I don't know what we're calling her, because she's a hippo, the avatar for the hippo god of death, but has wings. Cool.
Right.
I like that. Maybe it's a bird that cleans the hippo's teeth.
Oh, yeah, it could be that, potentially. I liked her costume. I thought it was pretty good.
I did too.
I was a little nervous when they teased it, though I guess I shouldn't have been because they always do a pretty good job with the costumes. But it's very Falcon-esque, but
Oh, yeah.
at the same time, that's all right. It still works. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fun to get her in costume. I know we were a little critical before about Steven amping up his fighting, but at the same time, that was a fun sequence, seeing them fighting
It
side
was.
by side and together. And I think this is the first original superhero that they've introduced in the MCU, right?
Ooh, interesting. Yes. Because I don't know of this character at all outside of this.
Yeah, Layla was an original creation for the show anyway. There was Melina was a character who was often related to, I forget if it was Marc or Steven, but from the Moon Knight comics. But they wanted to create somebody new. They wanted to create somebody Egyptian. And so they created an original superhero as well. So that's pretty cool. I would not be shocked if she shows up in the comics sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Which, and potentially somewhere in the MCU. It's good to have her as a hero, and like we said, it's a fun costume. I'm curious to see what else she could do other than essentially be Falcon. So I don't know. Should be
Yeah.
fun. Should be a nice time.
I liked her. I liked, like we talked about her, the scene where she is having the duel, the towelette conversation, the scene where she's with the avatar, like Osiris's avatar, and he's like, we're not doing so hot here. We need more avatars. And I was like, James Cameron is helping us out with that
Oh,
in a big time.
current, very current.
Yeah.
Check out
But
the
that
trailer in theaters this weekend on Doctor Strange 2.
it's all happening all the time. But that whole, like, when everything bad is happening and Harrow's breaking into the pyramid, and that Osiris avatar is like, someone's releasing Amit. Who could do this? I was like, come on, man. Like, that's the kind of stuff in a big episode like this. I'm like, you can't have your characters be this far behind us, the audience,
Yeah.
who are like, come on, guys, catch up. And then they're defeated off camera immediately.
Yeah, there was a lot of defeating off camera and doing stuff off camera. I wonder if it was a budget thing or a time thing or something like that. I suspect it wasn't. I suspect it was a structural thing because there were a lot of lines throughout this episode that were blunt.
Yeah.
You mentioned, and I'm sure, I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm sure there is something to be said if you are of Egyptian descent, that it probably felt very empowering to see the young girl come up and be like, are you Egyptian superhero? Yes. And hearing that so definitively out loud, that is important. But at the same time, I've seen that scene, particularly with female superheroes, so many times where they're like, they save a little girl. The little girl's like, you're an amazing superhero and an inspiration to everybody. And they're like, thanks very much. Goodbye. And then, I don't know. It starts to feel like a trope more than anything. And there was a lot of very tropey stuff and tropey lines throughout the episode that even felt more blunt than previous episodes, And maybe that is just, maybe that's just a factor of when you're getting to the big superhero fight, you got to do it all in previous.
It's got to happen, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to
and also
it.
there's just not a lot of real estate in this show to have like a longer conversation with a girl who's being rescued. And also it's sort of like, I see why they did it, but it also isn't germane to what's happening at all.
Yeah.
In here, like when they kept shooting to they kept cutting to the people getting in the van. I was like, who are these people? I'm like, oh, just people that are in trouble. I was like, that's everybody here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at those people who were having dinner in the alleyway. Their whole dinner got blown away.
That's a strong wind to blow away all those dishes directly. Yeah, I was.
What did you think about the move? Speaking about undefined powers, where Marc is like, God, how am I going to get there in time? And Khonshu's like, oh, you can always fly.
Yeah.
And then he just flies.
Well, after all of the like resurrection and the stress, Khonshu's battling Amit in one body, and then Marc walks out of the pyramid, and Khonshu's like, "Hey, do you want to help with this fight?" And he's like, then he goes through the whole oath. I was like, "You gotta say the oath. Get going to the whole other pyramid over there."
Well, I think that was a flashback. I think that part was a flashback. It was just kind of reminding us that he was going through it again.
No, yes, but he does walk out of where he died and has a Khonshu conversation, and then they do the flashback cutaways.
Conversation.
Conversation.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh man, I got into a big conversation with my wife the other day.
Oh man.
Let's throw out some compliments here. I really liked Khonshu's character throughout this series as being like a dick. Sort of throughout. The voice work was great. And the fact that they were able to make him a little bit threatening and a little bit bad at his job as a god, I thought was such a smart choice. And when Amit and Khonshu first face off, they had sort of like bad breakup energy. Like they knew each other. And I thought that was fun. I wish they had pushed that a little further and had that fight be a little bit more like, we're gods, we do this all the time, so naturally we can have a little bit of banter, because there just wasn't going to be banter between Moon Knight and Harrow.
I mean, honestly, at a certain level, the god stuff was more interesting and more fun than the human stuff, including Taweret, which is a rarity. You wouldn't expect that with a bunch of CGI characters running around. But yeah, like you said, they have all this backstory that's very interesting and fun to play with, down to Osiris as well, who we only get through the Avatar. But like you said, the design of Khonshu, just at a base level, I don't know why this is my focus. almost every time he showed up, but those little like threads that are connecting his
Yeah.
skull to his neck, really creepy but interesting,
Yeah.
and I don't know, I liked it. It was good stuff.
Yeah. Very
And I
cool.
also liked his suit at the end credit sequence. I thought that was fun, and that was a riff on what he looked like in Declan Shalvey's design at certain points as well. So that was good stuff.
Yeah. Very cool. And like you said early on, a lot of cool shots. There's the great shot of Marc's perspective when Harrow's about to kill him. And you see him looking up at Harrow, and behind them, Amit is like throwing Khonshu to the ground. I was like, oh, that's a cool shot. Giving us all that context from a POV shot like that, I thought was cool. And there were a lot of things like that where like the action felt of a piece, which is hard when you're doing a lot of real elements with that CGI stuff to make it look convincing. Khonshu was really well done. Amit I thought was cool from a CGI perspective, and not at all like the Jar Jar Binks that I first thought we were going to get.
Yeah. Why don't we talk about the ending? Because, like we mentioned earlier, there's a bunch of things that happen in quick succession here that, again, I feel I understand why they had this impulse, but I wish they had forgone it because I feel like it confuses things too much. You get Marc and Steven getting let go by Khonshu. Then they wake up in the psychiatric hospital. Harrow is leaving some bloody footprints. They realize they're switching back and forth, and this is a very fun, nice sequence with Oscar Isaac playing both characters in the frame at the same time, which is very cool. I don't think we saw that before on the show, and I assume they held back until the finale for that specific purpose. And he realizes, wait, I'm going to go. Harrow is actually trapped here, if anything. And then we cut to Harrow in the real psychiatric hospital there's a little bit of time first. Marc wakes up in Steven's apartment. His leg is still tied to the bed. There's two fish there now. We don't know exactly why. And he's like, oh boy, I can't believe you live like this. And that's the end of the show. And then
I will say,
yeah.
just real quick on that, I thought it was strange we never got a tie up on the Layla relationship. Like, because there was a whole love triangle thing happening between Marc, Steven, and Layla. And it felt like Steven and Layla were sort of vibing, for lack of a better word. And to have it just be like he wakes up alone and no final, like, is she there? Are they
I thought she was
going
to be in the bed. Yeah.
Yeah. Or making coffee. Not that we needed, like, oh, they hooked up. Awesome.
No, I needed
just
a
like
full-on sex scene right at the end of the show.
Yeah. During sex, the personality switching, confusing.
Absolutely, but
Harrow.
It's kind of a threesome.
Yeah, and throw Jake. I mean, Jake's gonna pop up in there.
Let's not take it that far, but that whole thing at the end, like, I assume they were presenting the two fish to be like, yes, their personalities are together, and it's metaphorically that. But also, I guess Jake went down and bought them two fish at some point, is the implication there.
Yeah, who's going to the epic battle where hundreds of souls were sacrificed, many, many dead bodies, and then back in London, they're like, yeah, I guess a goldfish, like pretty big one, like sort of round as opposed to the tiny. And yeah, some more food because we had a second fish. And great, that's it. Maybe he went to a fair and won it at some sort of ring toss situation. And that's where I got goldfish as a kid.
The most violent thing I can think of is going to a fair and playing the ring toss, so it makes sense that Jake Lockley would do that. Speaking of which, let's talk about that end credits sequence. So Harrow wakes up in the psychiatric hospital. It is the Sienkiewicz Psychiatric Facility. Shout out to Bill Sienkiewicz. Sinkovich? Yep. I never know how to pronounce his name. Classic Moon Knight, among many other things, artist. And he initially sees sand in his coffee cup, which, again, gross. And then it turns out to be coffee.
I order my coffee sandy.
Do you?
That's just the way I like it. Yep.
That's too much sugar, right?
Yeah, all sugar. Very little liquid.
Drop of coffee.
Yeah.
And then he gets taken out of the facility by Khonshu and Jake Lockley. Jake Lockley seemingly kills him, and that's where we end the show. First of all, I'll just say, real bummer if they did kill Harrow. I never like killing the villains. It's unnecessary, you know?
I mean, I think they did kill him. But honestly, the way the look on Harrow's face, it was almost like, wait, I'm Ethan Hawke. I'll come back for the second season. And then they killed him. which I was like, oh, bummer to go out that way. Yeah, and like also killed all the hospital people. Seems unnecessary to do that. The
Yeah,
whole thing.
I understand why they had this impulse. It's a little annoying. It's also the second Disney Plus Marvel show in a row that's had that thing of the villain being confronted by hero, anti-hero, being like, "Wait, don't kill me," and then the camera pulls away and pans up as they shoot them. That's what happened with Echo and Kingpin over in Hawkeye. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's obviously unintentional, but it's a little bit of repetitive storytelling there. And ultimately, like they said at the beginning here, I mean, they had no bones about, of course, Oscar Isaac and Moon Knight can come back at some point, but they really just wanted to concentrate on making 6 episodes. That's it. Reportedly, Oscar Isaac's contract, totally different than everybody else in Marvel, was not for 45 movies after this. It was just for this show, and that was it. So I
Mm.
wish because of that they had not left it open and had a more definitive ending here, because of course he's going to come back, but it feels like they just sort of petered out at the end of the show more than anything to me.
Um, yeah, I didn't feel like it petered out quite as hard, I guess, when it comes to Moon Knight as a character. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
opens the door for like obviously a problem like we predicted in previous episodes, having Jake is sort of Jake and Khonshu are sort of the enemies here now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what the only issue with that I think going forward is we've done the whole like how do I get along with this person occupying the same body, to have that be also the problem in the future feels like I would want a real creative way of showing that or getting into that, as opposed to a lot of like looks to the reflection in the windshield next to the in the car next door and being like, Jake, you knock it off.
Yeah, and hey, maybe there's other personalities in there as well. I guess we'll see. Potentially, assuming there's a second season or he shows up elsewhere. And on that note, why don't we turn to our vision board and talk about where, if anywhere, you would like to see Moon Knight show up next, or Super Layla?
Well, I mean, we're sort of early on in in this phase of the MCU. They've got Doctor Strange 2 coming out in a matter of hours at this point, that I think is going to really open up the next phase of movies. I feel like we'll probably get some um, looks at Moon Knight over the course of these next few movies. It's like Moon Knight being in like another multiverse, or Khonshu like takes over the world or something like that. So we have those reference points. But I don't think we have a shape of what the big Avengers Endgame, everybody shows up for the fight. I don't think we know any of the contours of that yet. So it's hard to tell where we'll see Moon Knight. And it also feels like the television side of everything isn't building toward a Defenders style thing like the Netflix shows was.
Yeah, I was thinking about this a little bit this morning after watching Moon Knight, how everybody keeps talking about this stuff as it's phase 4 of Marvel. And phase 1, 2, and 3 felt much more clear in terms of the thrust of the overall story, but also as significant chunks of what they were building towards. Here, phase 4 has been going on for years at this point. I don't
Yeah.
know. Phase 4 could be forever, it could be for the rest of our lifetimes. So, like you're saying, we don't have the shape there. But that said, I think people have talked about, and this makes a lot of sense, you could have a Midnight Suns type thing at some point with Moon Knight, with Blade, if Ghost Rider shows up again, if they do a reboot of that. There's a lot of other characters from sort of the dark, supernatural side of the universe where it would be interesting. The other thing that I think potentially would be interesting, I still have questions about how we went from Thor a decade ago at this point saying what you think of as magic we call science, to this being like, nah, they're gods, it's an afterlife, they all have
Yeah.
magic, don't worry about it, there's no technology involved here or whatever. So we could head towards some sort of place where we have like a god war. There clearly are
Mm.
all of these other pantheons out there. With we definitely have the Greek gods are going to be showing up in Thor Love and Thunder. Obviously we have the Asgardian gods, or whatever's left of them. Now we have the Egyptian gods. So how does that all work together? I don't know what that leads towards as a story, but it is a potentially interesting place to go in terms of how religion how these gods work in the Marvel universe going forward as you add in more and more of them. So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of what big crossover event in Marvel Comics history we could point to that is that sort of God War thing. Like, obviously, with the all the Thanos stuff, it was Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, very clean connection point. I just don't know what the big Pantheon versus Pantheon reference would be.
I mean, it could also be something like they could show up in Thor: Love and Thunder and get wiped out again, potentially, just because you have Gore the God Butcher, Christian Bale as the villain there. So it could be that. It could also be the same sort of thing where maybe not that, but somewhere down the road, it's fodder to be like, ooh, there's this big villain and he's going around and murdering all the pantheons and anybody who could be a threat to him or her or whatever. So I don't know. But like you said, there's not a specific storyline to point to. It's just they're building up this side of the universe, but they're also building up all the sides of the universe. So I guess we'll see how it goes.
Because I think the even money is on Secret War being sort of the next phase, sort of a multiversal version of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I could definitely see that where we get like all the bunch of Spider-Mans everyone's fighting in space against this like high evolutionary type character, Beyonder type character. But we'll see, I guess.
The last one that I wanted to say on the vision board, and this is more like a pitch to Marvel of what they need to do, is obviously the makers of Moon Knight wanted to make a big statement in terms of the "you're an Egyptian superhero," right, moment that we talked about. Don't leave Layla on the bench until whenever Moon Knight appears again. The best way of cementing her as that Egyptian superhero, you don't even necessarily have to give her own series. You don't need to give her own movie, though obviously that would be great. But have her show up someplace else. Have her interact with somebody else. That's how you keep that train going. That's how you really make a statement more than that one scene with the little girl.
Captain America Winter Soldier Season 2. There's an episode in Egypt or anywhere in that side of the world. She's there.
That's a great idea. I mean, particularly like you get the classic Marvel, well, you have wings too. I also have wings. How are our wings different? And then they just kind of roll from there. They're doing Captain America 4, or were doing Captain America 4. There's been some scuttlebutt about behind the scenes. So that would be a perfect place to put her. I love that idea. Let's make it happen, Marvel.
We can make it happen.
We're going to make it happen. And for all of you out there, thank you for listening to the Moon Knight portion of our podcast. We will be back with a podcast for Doctor Strange 2 in a matter of days at this point.
Yes.
So tune back for that. Also, potentially we'll keep things going up until Miss Marvel comes up in June, so stay tuned for that. But otherwise, you can support this podcast and all the podcasts we do at patreon.com/comicbookclub. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Crowdcast and YouTube. Come hang out. We'd love to chat with you about Moon Knight or whatever else is coming next. iTunes, Android, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice. To subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Comic Book Live on Twitter, also at Marvel Vision Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, comicbookclublive.com for this podcast and many more. Until next time, stay marvelous.
Stay marvelous, Hippo Bird Knight.